This class is concerned with scenario planning. Now, scenario planning is used to make future predictions and long-term plans. It looks at the current environment and tries to plan forward to avoid future potential threats to the business. So scenario planning looks at the current environment, looks at the situation the business now finds itself in, and tries to plan forward to avoid future threats that may be anticipated. Its method is to create a number of possible future scenarios that may face the business, and then tries to devise plans to overcome any of these future threats to the business. So it looks at where the business is now and tries to imagine what could happen, perhaps what threats could arise in the future, and tries to devise plans to offset the threats, tries to devise ways to minimize the impact of the threats or to avoid the threats completely. The scenarios take all information that is available into account. They may use, for example, a pest analysis. PEST stands for the political, economic, social and technological factors that may impinge upon the business. These are external factors that may cause problems for the business if they arise in some adverse context. So for example, let's say the economy dipped significantly. Now that's outside of the control of the business, but it would affect the business. So has the business got a scenario to deal with that eventuality if it did arise? Now let's look at the benefits of scenario planning. Well, scenario planning allows management to speculate about future threats and develop possible solutions in advance of them occurring. So the management has anticipated problems and has plans ready in the event of adverse circumstances arising in the future. It gives the business market confidence because it has anticipated possible problems and devised solutions in advance. So the business feels more secure because the management have plans in the event of something going wrong, something in the environment. It may give a business an early warning of some adverse situation if the real circumstances match a scenario that was considered earlier. So it's constantly looking at the environment. Good management looks at the environment, and if it sees situations arising which were anticipated in some scenario, then it may move towards the implementation of the plans worked out in the event of that scenario. In other words, it has anticipated what's going to happen and it has some plans in place to deal with it. Now the scenario process in 7 steps. Well, first of all, identify the current issues confronting the business. This may be a problem, a threat, or even an opportunity. So look at what's confronting the business at the moment. What is it possible to see at the moment? List the factors that determine success or failure of the decision being considered. So look at where the business is and look at what it's considering to do, and look at the factors that determine the success or failure, or the likely success or the likely failure of the decision being considered. So look at relevant research, for example. This could be research within the industry, research conducted by the company itself. It could even be academic research or government research or published research. Just look to see whatever sources of information are out there and are available and see what they can suggest is good practice. And define success or failure. How does a company know when it's successful? Well, it must have set up some criterion that says this is successful, or some criteria if there are several factors to be taken into account. But it must know when it's succeeded. It must know when it has achieved what it set out to achieve. It must have some objective measure. And list the conditions that will determine the success or failure. What determines the success or failure, and list those out. And list the logical sequence of events for the solution or the resolution of the issue. If there is a problem, try to work through it logically. What must be dealt with first? What's next? What depends on what? Get a logical list of what's required and then implement that. So the list the factors that determine the success or failure of the decision being considered means list the factors logically. What determines what? What goes before what? What's a precondition? So it's a logical approach. Next, list the forces that may impact on the key factors affecting the business. What are the key forces that impact on the business? These may be pestle. Well, I said earlier pest. Pestle is just an extended form of pest. Pestle is an anagram. It stands for political, economic, social, technical, legal, and environmental. So these are all the external factors which may impact upon the business. We say forces at the macro level, so forces that are outside of the control of the business. So list the forces that impact on the business. Conduct a pestle analysis. In other words, list all the factors. Forces at the micro level, for example, competition, pricing, labour market conditions, logistics, marketing, so on. All of these factors, these should be listed out as well because they're important. In devising a scenario, all the factors must be considered. Look at factors leading to innovation and change in the marketplace. Important. If the rate of technological change is very rapid, then they may have implications for the technology being used in the business, the type of capital being used. And so that should be taken into account in scenario planning. What's the market demand and what are the core competencies of the business? Do the core competencies meet the requirements of the market? The workforce may have particular skills. Well, are those skills in demand in the marketplace? Or perhaps those skills are now obsolete. They've been replaced by automated machinery. Possible. List the driving forces by importance and certainty. What's leading to the change? What's leading to changes in the market? What's leading to the appraisal of the strategy itself? What are the driving forces that are forcing management into scrutinizing its strategy and looking at the forces of change? What's the scale of the decision being considered? Is it a big corporate decision that's going to affect the whole business, or is it something very operational that affects one of the departments within the business? Is it a piece of investment required for production? Is it a restructuring of the administration? Clearly, the scale of the decision is important. If it's a big decision affecting the whole business, should the business continue to sell a particular product in a particular market? Should the business expand into an overseas market? Or if it's a big decision, presumably it will be dealt with a lot of care and attention and a lot of planning and a lot of research. If it's a small scale decision, perhaps not involving too much capital or too much time, then the decision could be taken faster. The degree of uncertainty in the environment is always an issue. In truth, management cannot see the future, nor can anyone else. The world changes almost on a day-to-day basis, and in times of rapid technological change, that's even more so the case. So markets are changing, political situations are changing, economies are changing, technology is changing, everything's changing it seems, and it's changing almost at an increasing rate, creating more uncertainty within the planning framework. But management has to cope with that. So it needs scenarios to try and work out what if this happens, and what if that happens? What's the strategy? What will we do if this happens? And these are not idle speculations. These are proper managerial functions to be prepared in the event of something happening. Develop a set of possible future outcomes which may affect the business. Look at the business in the context of all that's happening around it and try to develop a set of outcomes. Try to gauge what is possible, what future outcomes are possible, and how will these outcomes affect the business. Develop a set of scenarios that may impact on the decision being considered. If the business is considering investing in a new piece of machinery, look at the various scenarios. What if the government conducts a trade deal with another country in where labour is extremely cheap? Will that make the machine redundant? What if the market turns against the product? That's a scenario. What if? And try to have a set of responses if any adverse situation arises. The scenarios consider how business decisions need to be appraised in the light of possible future conditions. So the scenarios pose the question, what if the market changes? What if the government brings out new rules on the production of certain items? What if? Then the decision must be appraised and must be looked at in the context of that possibility. How likely is the possibility? Well, that's another question. It may happen or it may not happen. So some element of conjecture is required, some element of subjective probability maybe, saying this may happen and the chances of it happening are 40%. It's a guess, but based on experience, based on contacts within the market, it may be that's what the market believes. 40% is the chance of the government having rules about the production of a certain item, or the government opening up a certain market, or the government introducing new employment laws, or whatever it is. So the company needs to have the scenario and the what-if situation, and it needs to appraise that situation in the light of possible future outcomes or conditions. Develop a set of possible future outcomes which may affect the business. Now the possible future outcomes, well, these could be winners and losers, what's known sometimes a zero-sum situation, what's known in the theory of games as a zero-sum situation. Look at the possible outcomes if a certain scenario arises. If it's the case that one group win, and whatever they win, another group loses, then the sum of the benefits come to zero, because the losses exactly match the winnings, the gains. So look at it in the context of that. It's possible that a scenario arises where the company loses but another company may win. So if it's a competitive situation, we're talking about market share. If one company within the industry loses market share, then another company in the industry must gain market share. So the sum total comes to zero sum. It's, in other words, what the one loses, the other gains. That may be a situation. It's more likely the case when you're dealing with market shares, because the market share is always at up to 100%. Challenge and response, overcoming obstacles. Looking at scenarios that deal with possible situations and trying to challenge that situation and coming up with a solution, trying to itemize possible solutions that will deal with whatever adverse conditions may arise in the future. And look at changes over a period of time, the sort of evolution that has happened within the market, how the market has developed, and what's the likely future of the market. Is there evidence from other countries about what's happened in those countries regarding this market? Has the market increased or declined in other countries? And what are the wider influences that may arise that it could affect production? It could be genuinely environmental issues. It could be seen that the product is not environmentally friendly. It's not green. It's not a green product, and therefore the business is going to come under pressure from the green lobby. It could be that the government wants to encourage growth in a different area, and so it's not going to promote business in that particular part of the country. Could be. So look at the scenarios and look at what the evolution, what is the pattern of comment that's been made by government, by competitors, by research agencies. What is that information telling the company? 6 is analyze each possible future scenario and develop reasonable decisions to accommodate the situation. So look at each scenario. Develop a whole series of scenarios, develop a whole series of possible questions, and then develop reasonable decisions to accommodate the situation. Having posed a problem which hasn't arisen, but having posed a problem, try to develop answers that are realistic and balanced and feasible, that may be implemented should the adverse situation arise. Treat the scenarios developed as actually occurring. Take them seriously, because they may arise. So be realistic in developing responses to them. And realize that whatever situation has been imagined, whatever scenario has been posed, it could arise. It is realistic. It could arise, and therefore it deserves proper treatment. It deserves proper consideration. It should be looked at as something which is possible, and the company could face it, and therefore the company should have a response ready in the event of it arising. Select appropriate indicators for each scenario. If a scenario is envisaged, if something happens, if the market turns against the product because it's seen as not environmentally friendly, what indicators are there? What are environmental pressure groups saying about production, and what sort of production methods are in the news that the pressure groups are saying are not environmentally friendly? And if the business is using exactly those same production methods, that's an indicator. There's going to be an issue. So look at the indicators. These provide insights beforehand of scenarios that are actually unfolding. So be aware of what's been said by researchers, by journalists, by academics, by the government, by industry, by pressure groups. Be aware of what's been said, what issues are they highlighting, what are they confronting, what do they believe should happen. Because these are indicators of what scenarios may arise in the future. So scenario planning is trying to imagine what could confront the business and developing responses that may deal with any adverse impact that may arise in the future. So it looks at what could go wrong and it has responses to what could go wrong. Now there is another part which I haven't emphasized significantly throughout this session, and that is the scenarios could anticipate positive future developments, and it should have the resources and the capability of exploiting any opportunities that come along, positive opportunities that come along and confront the business. So there is another side to what I've done. I've emphasized all the possibilities which are negative, ones which could damage the business, but it is possible for to develop scenarios that are quite optimistic, and these could be based on research and observations which suggest that the company is well positioned for development and growth given the nature of its product and given the position it finds itself within the marketplace. So scenario planning can be positive as well as negative, but the issues that confront it are important. It's important as an activity. The management should have responses ready in either case. That's all I'm going to deal with in this session, so I'm going to leave it at that. Say thank you for watching.